Fallout 4 was released just over a decade ago, which is kind of exciting, because it means the next Fallout game is only another decade or two away. Regardless, Fallout is a series I love. In fact, I would go as far to say it's my favorite game series of all time. It has something for just about everybody out there. For the CRPG boomers, it's the classics like Fallout 1 and 2, while a majority of Reddit has led me to believe that Obsidian's Fallout New Vegas is the pinnacle of the series. Aside from personal favorites though, there is one game in this franchise that even the most diehard of Fallout fans tend to sweep under the rug as if it never happened. And no, it's not Fallout 76. It's Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, the 2004 console adaptation of the beloved series that is mostly known for being the worst received Fallout game ever by a long shot. If you've never heard of it, that's fine, because most of the fanbase that does know about it would rather not in the first place. But what actually made this the worst rated Fallout game by a long shot? What made it so different, and is it really that bad anyways? Well, let's find out. Take a look at Fallout Brotherhood of Steel for the PlayStation 2. But in order to understand what made Fallout Brotherhood of Steel such a different and controversial entry in the series, we'll need to take a quick look back at some good old Fallout development history. Before Bethesda got their hands on it, the Fallout IP was owned by Interplay Entertainment, a company known for both game development and publishing through the 80s and 90s. But despite the success of Fallout and many of its other titles, Interplay had been on the verge of bankruptcy for a while, and the situation wasn't getting any better. Money issues, mismanagement, and uncertainty about the company itself caused many of its projects to struggle. Now, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, interestingly enough, actually wasn't supposed to be a Fallout game at all. Initially pitched with the name Future Shock, a demo was produced in 2002 to demonstrate the basics of the gameplay: real-time isometric combat with a post-apocalyptic type of setting. Interplay's management liked the demo, but they had another idea. Why create another post-apocalyptic IP when we already have one? So they blew the dust off their good old isometric CRPG franchise, and Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was born. Interplay wanted to bring the series to consoles, and one of their concepts for doing so was simplifying it a bit, leaving behind the turn-based combat in favor of more action-oriented gameplay. Not a bad idea. After all, they were successful doing the same thing with Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance for consoles in 2001. But here's the kicker. They also wanted to simplify Fallout itself. Toning down the series' quirks and references would create a more approachable game for the new console audience. What a novel idea that was. Development would happen alongside the ill-fated sequel to Fallout 2 known as Project Van Buren, and while that would eventually be cancelled when Black Isle Studios was shut down, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel somehow managed to come out the other end, releasing for PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2004. Right, now that we got all that out of the way, let's get on to the actual game. Set in 2208, you get to play as a fresh initiate in the Brotherhood of Steel, aptly referred to as the Initiate, who is sent to the wasteland town of Carbon to find a group of Brotherhood paladins that have gone missing. That's pretty much a bulk of the story, which plays out in a linear structure across chapters, instead of Fallout's usual open-world RPG format. Right off the bat, the game's introduction does a great job at laying the groundwork to show just how far this thing is from an actual Fallout title, featuring a bunch of stock footage, scenes ripped straight from the first two games, some heavy metal music in the background, as well as narration from what I can assume is the closest thing they could find to somebody that sounds kinda like Ron Perlman.
Out of nowhere, an army of giants called mutants appeared. They slaughtered many people.
Suffice to say, it's a bit of a rough start. Either way, there's no character building or creation here. Instead, you're given a few pre-made characters to choose from. You have Cyrus, who looks like a character from Def Jam, Nadia, who picked a terrible outfit for a nuclear wasteland, and Kane, who is this game's version of a ghoul. Now let's talk about Kane for a second. Aside from looking more like a zombie from Call of Duty, he also somehow manages to become the first ghoul to ever join the ranks of the Brotherhood of Steel, who, by the way, kinda despise ghouls, feral or otherwise. So being a bit of a Fallout lore nerd myself, this kinda rattled my chain. Anyways, after picking a character, you're sent to the town of Carbon, where the Paladins were last seen, and given an interesting in-game cutscene with some raiders threatening and harassing the local townsfolk.
You can't do this.
Shut your mouth, worm, before I step on you.
Interesting. Or intriguing, depending on who you ask. Again, this scene also does a great job of introducing the game's writing and dialogue, which, by the way, well, they aren't very good. I was amused at first because of how unexpected it was, even for a Fallout game, but it gets old quickly when you see that nearly every single interaction in the game has the same style of writing. Yeah, I get it, it's an apocalypse, most Wastelanders aren't exactly educated, and Fallout has its fair share of swearing and dark humor. But it takes the usual great, witty writing from the series and reduces it down to what I can best describe as raunchy toilet humor.
Armpit at your service. What can I do for you?
Dialogue options almost always seem to offer some sort of swearing or insult, and sometimes doesn't even offer a neutral option, like when talking to the mayor, where the only choice to end the conversation with him is, "Forget it, asshole." Either way, after dealing with some raiders giving the local bartender trouble, listening to him swear and spit between words, you'll be pointed over to the mayor. So I could go on, but in case you haven't caught on here, the game's story is essentially laid out as one giant fetch quest where you're bounced between different characters to find these missing paladins. Go here, talk to this person, retrieve or kill something, come back, repeat. Fetch quests are not uncommon in RPGs, and I don't think they're all that bad. But at least they usually have something to offer aside from just a reward. An interesting location to explore, unique NPCs, lore to uncover, you get the idea. But not here. You want to find your missing friends? Good, go kill 50 giant rad scorpions in my warehouse, and then maybe I'll point you to the next person you should talk to who will probably do the same thing. Now, I didn't exactly have high hopes when it came to the gameplay, but I'll actually admit it's surprisingly fine enough. It's a top-down hack-and-slash style action game with a mixture of melee and range combat. You run around and you attack stuff. Sometimes you'll be required to avoid certain pitfalls or traps, like lasers, but that's basically it. Weapons mostly feel the same, and outside of a skill for specific melee weapons, there's no sort of special abilities. No, not even VATS, or any reference to it for that matter. Combat is introduced pretty early on when clearing those raiders out of the bar. Again, run and attack. Pretty by-the-book stuff for a hack-and-slash game, and hey, it works. It does, however, suffer from a very simple oversight that seems to be common amongst the more budget hack-and-slash games, where you have to come to a full stop before attacking. And when you're usually being attacked by multiple enemies at once, it means you're going to soak a lot of hits. You can crouch to take cover behind objects, and there is a lock-on option for targeting enemies, which the game never told me about. This made guns pretty much useless, so I equipped the iron fists and spun around in a circle while attacking, which did seem to work pretty well. If you played any other top-down console ARPG from this era, you're not going to be in for many surprises here. Even for the time, it's nothing remarkable and doesn't really do anything particularly unique, but hey, it works, and it fits the hack-and-slash bill well enough. Of course, how effective you are in combat is based on your skills. And no special system here. Instead, you get a list of skill options that you choose to spec points into that you'll get from leveling up. Again, not much else to mention. I'd say it's almost like a very streamlined version of Fallout 4's skill system, which was arguably already a bit streamlined itself. Granted, this was the older era of Fallout where the series was mostly known as a CRPG, and building a character in the first two games felt like you were about to start a goddamn D&D campaign in comparison to the later games. So again, this simplified system at least makes sense to go with the simplified console-esque gameplay. Now, not that I want to ruin this game's remarkably in-depth story or anything, so if you really want to experience this one for yourself, feel free to skip this section. But here's a quick rundown of how it all goes. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel progresses linearly through 3 chapters, with each taking place in a different locale. Chapter 1 sees the player trying to find the missing paladins and ultimately helping rescue the town of Carbon from a band of raiders. Heading to the town of Los, afterwards, where the search continues in Chapter 2. Carrying on to the final chapter set in and around the Vault-Tec Corporate Vault, very creative name, where you're put up against a band of super mutants commanded by a character named Addis. Oh yeah, the paladins are mostly dead by the way, so the whole original objective is essentially pointless. The interesting thing here is that this takes place after the events of the first game where the Master was destroyed and his super mutant army dismantled, and is meant to be a sort of soft continuation of those events. Supposedly the remnants of that army are the ones that have seized control of the vault in Chapter 3, with their leader Addis being a former general in the Master's army of super mutants. I'll admit it's an interesting idea, but it does raise a more important question of why this tie-in was even done in the first place. If one of the main concepts of this game was to streamline the Fallout lore to be more approachable, why even have any reference to the first game at all when so many of the Fallout characteristics are either glazed over or entirely ignored? I mean, don't get me wrong here, there's a lot to learn about the series universe, but it's really not that hard to grasp the basic concepts of the Fallout world, which gives some pretty important context. So the idea of oversimplifying it for the console audience seems like a whole bunch of wasted potential. It's also worth noting that a bulk of the team who worked on the original games, including people like Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky, were long gone by the time that even Fallout Tactics came around in 2001. and some of the developers who worked on Brotherhood of Steel were supposedly longtime fans of the series, so I hardly think it was a case of the developers not knowing or caring about the project. It was probably more to do with Interplay sticking the Fallout name on this game and trying to push it out as fast as possible to keep the company from sinking into the ocean, and it's kind of a shame. Being a big fan of the series, it is kind of just disappointing. Simplifying the gameplay for the console audience isn't a bad idea at all. I mean, I couldn't picture playing Fallout 1 on a PS2 either. But simplifying the Fallout universe is really this game's biggest sin. If you take a game like Fallout and strip away all of its distinctive quirks and unique theme that it's so well known for, this is pretty much what you get. A generic, okay-ish post-apocalyptic RPG with a few Fallout references sprinkled in. At the end of the day, the best way I could think to describe Fallout Brotherhood of Steel is that it's an okay ARPG for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, and to anybody that's not a Fallout fan, I don't see it being too bad of an experience. But for myself as a longtime fan, its lore and universe, I can confidently say that my biscuits are, in fact, burnt. So let me know what your favorite Fallout game is, and please don't start a war in the comments, because war never changes.